Hello everyone, I'm Eternal Flame here, and before we start this episode, since it has been a really long time since I had gone into this series, like it's been almost 2 months by this point I think, I decided I'm going to do a really small recap of what has happened in the previous episodes, mainly because in the last one I do know there were some people who were a little bit confused and didn't fully remember, so yeah. But if you do fully remember everything, of course chapters are below, so you should be able to time skip into the actual start of the thing, as well as a time code for where this little thing ends. Anyways, let's get right into the recap. After the sealing of Satoru Gojo, Toji Fushiguro begins to do his search, trying to find a way in order to free him from the prison realm, leading to him returning to someone he had worked with in the past previously, someone who was rumored to having a cursing that was capable of turning off curse techniques. The perfect way to disable the prison realm. Meanwhile, Mahito had found his own way to escape from Shibuya, with more motivation than he ever had in his life to improve and get better vital transfiguration than he had before, capturing both Panda and Granny Origami in order to discover more things about the soul and how to utilize it, creating several combinations of flesh with Sorcerer, amplifying them in order to make them as strong as possible, making them capable of even fighting against high-end grade 1s. Eventually Toji had met up with the one who had this rumored information, Nagumo Zenin, a Zenin clan member who decided to go rogue due to being completely underestimated by the clan for being a woman. One for both her power as well as her cunning was able to create an entire criminal network of jujutsu sorcery. However, Nagumo had no intention to give it for free, leading to a tournament between the 5 best fighters of the underground against Megumi Fushiguro, where if Megumi were to lose this battle, he would end up now belonging to Nagumo. A deal Toji begrudgingly accepted in exchange for one more thing, which was adding in both Nobara and Yuji to this tournament to make it a 3v5 rather than a 5v1. During this time, the tournament had already been infiltrated. Furthermore, the second fighter had already been turned by Mahito, the infiltrator. And right as Yuji was about to land a Black Flash of the 4th fighter to finish them off, suddenly Mahito intervened. As now Mahito prepares to wage bloody war against our heroes, forcing Yuta Akotsu to have to execute a mutated panda, having Akari, Yuji, Nobara, as well as 2 fighters from the underground known as Sumeri and Riku to have to battle against several of the transfigured human combinations that Mahito had created, while he himself battled against Nagumo and had Toji Fushiguro battle against Naoya Zenin, Jinichi Zenin, and Ranta Zenin. And now without further ado, we return back to the battle. The 3 ghosts of the Zenin clan facing off against a man who had freed himself completely from the chains of curse energy. Out of the 3 ghosts currently in front of him, Toji was only really able to recognize one of them, his own brother Jinichi. Naoya was a little bit familiar, but he didn't really remember that much about him. Ranta was someone who he completely didn't know, as the worm curse then began to open up its mouth, resulting in a blade rising out. This blade being the Soul Split Katana. As Toji then said, "You know, originally I didn't kill you guys because I didn't want to put my son down the wrong path. But now that I get the chance to kill you guys with no consequences happening, I'm honestly kinda thankful that that curse got you guys." As out from Jinichi's back, several arms began to rise out, now Jinichi having a total of 8 arms. His body was relatively armored, with him having 4 eyes in total. Ranta still looked the most human out of all of them, but even he was a bit different, as now both of his arms were lifted up, and they had eyeballs on each of them. Naoya was by far and away the least human looking out of all of them, taking a similar appearance to that of his curse form. As Jinichi then said, "You definitely would have been able to kill us all if you had done so earlier, but now that Mahito has amplified and made us so much more than we could have ever hoped to be in our original life, we are going to put you down." That was when Naoya spoke, as Naoya said, "Our souls have reached new heights and now we've achieved levels far beyond what we would have gone through normal training." And that caused Toji to chuckle a little bit. Oh, how the mighty, prideful Zenins have fallen. As a smirk rose onto Toji, it didn't matter how powerful these people were. After all, with his blade he would be able to cut through any of them, no matter how durable it was, he could cut right through their soul. Though he didn't have to admit as well, he was a little bit surprised that there was no Chojuro here. He was expecting this to be a 4v1, but this was only a 3v1. He did also know Chojuro was here, but he didn't know where he was, so Mahito must be using them as support right now. But then suddenly Toji felt a fluctuation in the air, as Naoya rushed right towards him, freezing the air several times over and causing a large explosion to rush towards Toji. And right as Toji was about to try and move to stop it, suddenly he felt himself completely unable to. It felt like 4 eyes were staring at him, those eyes being the eyes of Ranta Zenin. And while Toji began to physically resist against it, he didn't have much time, as he was suddenly hit by Naoya's attack. Though even resisting for that small amount of time did cause some minor damage on Ranta. And while Toji was launched backwards, he looked up to see Jinichi high in the air, before Jinichi launched all 8 of his fists down. While Jinichi was already good at launching out curse energy fist projectiles like this, he could launch them out at near 4 times speed. So Toji had to lift up his arms in order to block properly against it, making a large crater where Toji was stuck inside. And when the dust settled, Toji was still standing inside the crater. As he opened and closed his hands, he had to admit he was a little bit impressed by these two so far. He wasn't expecting them to be so much more superior in comparison to their original lives. Toji did have to internally sigh a little bit though. If he was being honest, normally he would have likely kept these guys alive to be good tests for Yuji, Megumi, and Nobara. After all, he felt they would be pretty strong and be able to push them to their limits to get them stronger. But this was not one of those times. He needed to kill them. He was a slight bit disappointed, but at the same time, he knew there was always going to be better opportunities. As Naoya rushed down into that hole at full speed, attempting to slam themselves right down into Toji, but Toji was able to spin out the way before landing a punch right on Naoya's face, sending him rocketing right into the crater's wall. As Toji told them, "You're fast, but I can see your movements." Before he looked up as he saw a massive barrage of fists coming right towards him, all of them rocketing towards him at once at massive speeds. In Toji's perspective, it almost felt like time froze, as he quickly analyzed the entire area, trying to figure out what the best pathway to go would be to reach him. And seeing the large amount of fists coming towards him, Toji didn't waste movements. Each movement he made was precise, fluid, and most of all, it looked so casual even from Toji. While Toji himself couldn't get physically stronger, he had spent the 10 years of training mastering each and every martial art he could. His skill as a martial artist and hand-to-hand combatant even went beyond that of special forces. But more than that, he had to adapt that skill. He had to figure out how to utilize it. After all, he wasn't just fighting against people, he was fighting against curses, so he infused that style and created several of his own. Before eventually the path was found, as he leaped high into the air, jumping off the air several times, almost like he was flying. In a burst of speed that caught Junichi off guard, suddenly Toji was right next to Junichi, and he took out his blade. However, right before the blade could make contact with Junichi's neck, suddenly he felt a stop in his body. Ranta at the last moment was able to completely stop his body, at least for a couple of seconds, until Toji completely overpowered it, forcing Ranta to have to let go. But rather than this being a lethal cut that would have cut off his head, instead it ended up cutting off 2 of Junichi's arms. This did cause Junichi to be quite a bit of pain, but that pain was quickly turned into curse energy. It was now being done on instinct. Negative emotions like pain, regret, anger, and those emotions were all being turned into curse energy to amplify these transfigured humans. Toji was rather quickly figuring out between them who was the biggest threat, and right now he had to admit the biggest threat was Ranta, mainly because if Ranta wasn't here he'd be able to kill the other 2 pretty easily, but so long as Ranta was on the battlefield he was going to disable his movements. But there was no way that Naoya or Junichi were going to let him get to Ranta that easily either, which was going to make things a pain. As Toji then hopped off air and landed on one of the walls, thinking to himself on what he should do as his next plan. As he saw Junichi and Naoya land right next back to Ranta, but at the same time the ground began to erupt, as several serpent-like curse spirits began to rise up around them as well, each of them beginning another rush on Toji. Furthermore, those cursed spirits were amplified by Mahito's idol transfiguration, changed in shape in order to make them have a more combat-based form. As Toji smirked a little bit and said, "Man, he really does not want me to go over to Nagumo, does he?" Before Toji jumped right into the snakes, spinning around midair and slicing through each of them all at once. It didn't matter how durable their shells were, Toji was able to slice through anything just like it was butter. But as he was slicing through them, suddenly he felt Naoya appear right behind him, as large bits of the air were frozen into frames right behind him. Before Naoya crushed right through it, causing another explosion to rapidly launch Toji right through the cursed spirit corpses that he had just created. At the same time, Junichi punched with all 6 of his arms at once, instead focusing all the punches down to make one massive fist launched right towards Toji's direction. And right as Toji was about to dodge, Ranta forced his movements to stop, forcing him to stop dead in his tracks. However, notably to their surprise, Toji didn't actually try to resist this time against him. Instead, he allowed himself to get hit back, creating another wave of smoke. Before out from that wave of smoke, suddenly a chain wrapped right around Ranta's arm, pulling him right in towards it. Toji had now begun to use the chain of 1,000 miles. This ended up catching both Naoya and Junichi completely off guard, as Ranta lifted up his arm, attempting to use his cursing to stop Toji's movements right in its place. But as he was using his arm, he felt pain rack across his entire body. And while he was trying his best to convert it to curse energy to try and amplify his power, it was too late, as suddenly his arm was sliced right off by Toji. And right before Toji could go for a second movement, suddenly the air froze right around Toji and they each exploded from Naoya's movements, causing Toji to be launched back a bit. As cursed, Naoya attempted to rush right towards Toji, trying to land a punch right on his face. But a smirk rose on him. After all, this was Toji's next step in his plan. He had weakened Ranta, so now he could do his next move freely. As Toji used one of his arms to pull Naoya into himself, dodging the blow and redirecting it. But he used his other arm to slice right through Naoya, killing him in a single blow and cutting him completely in half. As Naoya's body fell to the ground before it began to fade, turning back to that of a normal person. This did catch Toji slightly off guard. He thought they might have been vengeful cursed spirits, but no. This was another technique at play. as it did make Toji have to question how much preparation did Mahito do, but he started to recognize that technique immediately, granny origami, an assassin that Nagumo had hired and had worked with him in the past, one that was able to take the bodies of dead people and resurrect them. Toji figured that Mahito, because of his ability to transfigure someone's soul, could revive them with their full soul intact, mainly because there was no chance they'd be able to overpower his transfiguration. But that made Toji smile a bit more as he began to chuckle a bit. After all, he was worried they were vengeful cursed spirits, but no, they were only enhanced humans. If they were vengeful cursed spirits, they might have been able to surpass their limits massively over, but no. Because they weren't, he knew they weren't fully a threat. And once he looked back over to Ranta as well as Shinichi, he could see several cursed spirits beginning to rise up. Cursed spirits act as extra reinforcement to make up for the death of Naoya. Still, now that Ranta had lost his arm, his ability to paralyze Toji was going to go significantly down. After all, now he only had 3 eyes instead of 4. But the cursed spirits that were sent over here were a little bit different, as the ones previously were meant to be just massive creatures, but instead now there was an army of small ones. And it made a memory come back to Toji, one from 10 years ago when he battled against Gojo Satoru and defeated him. It did make a smirk rise onto Toji as he said, good memories. But still, some weak cursed spirits weren't going to get in his way. After all, he knew why he was able to use the strategy and why it worked on Gojo. With Toji, his senses were not going to be overwhelmed, not by numbers like this. Mahito was smart, a prodigy, someone who had researched her techniques to become as powerful as possible in hopes of beating Toji. But there was one mistake he made. He was way too impatient. Toji was certain about this fact. Today was the day that Mahito was going to die. Whether he put him down, Nagumo put him down, or one of their allies put them down, Mahito was not getting out of here alive. After all, this entire time he had been listening to each of the battles happening, and he could see that each of his students had won. Each of his students were overcoming their challenge. The only one that was still left fighting was Megumi right now, and the rest of them were each on their way to try and back up against Mahito. As a focus entered into Toji's eyes, thinking to himself that he couldn't let these kids show him up. As his eyes locked onto Ranta, Ranta was going to be the first one to kill, the second and the final one would be Junichi, then he would go over to help Nagumo, before he then took out a chain of 1,000 miles, spinning it around rapidly, creating a tornado of chain and dust, as with each movement he was able to deal with tens of curses all at once. Each of these were only grade 4 to grade 3 level curses, making them not that powerful, but primarily here to try and confuse Toji's senses. But even then, it wasn't doing too much to him, nothing more than being a slight distraction. As Junichi began to release a rapid barrage of fists in the air, trying to take advantage of this chance with Toji being so focused on the cursed spirits. Or at least that was what Junichi thought. But Toji began to dodge each of them coming towards him, dodging them with relative ease all the while he was taking out the weaker and cursed spirits. He was moving so fluidly, so effortlessly that it was even starting to piss Junichi off. A part of Junichi had always thought of himself as superior. After all, he was born with a cursed technique. But there was always a small part of him that was aware of the reality that Toji was superior. Even though he didn't have a curse technique, he had physicality that he could never match, the power and ability to be able to wipe out the entire Zenin clan at any point they wanted. And most of all, even more annoying was the fact that they were the ones who had the son of the 10 shadow technique, not him, them. How could a failure like that have a son like him? And most of all, cause of Toji, he managed to slip away from the Zenin clan. How dare he still stand in front of them? How dare he continue to get stronger? Ranta, on the other hand, was amazed. He had to admit, he always knew Toji was strong. He always knew Toji had the power to wipe out the entire Zenin clan. It was part of why he trained. And yet this man was so much more powerful than he had expected. A part of Ranta had to wonder what would have happened if he went rogue from the Zenin clan and instead decided to join them. Maybe life could have been better for him. Maybe he could have even pulled off getting Toji to train him. But that chance was missed, as both of them were more determined than ever to kill Toji right here and now. Mahito had given them the perfect opportunity to fight against Toji once more, and there was no way they were going to squander it. It was so well that Mahito had even released his control on them. He could feel their hate for Toji, so he decided why not let them do it himself. As Junichi and Ranta could feel their control being lifted, but at the same time they knew it was limited, only to take down Toji. As Junichi focused 2 of their arms down, starting to charge up curse energy, while at the same time he had the other 4 arms rapid-fire blows, releasing a machine gun of massive fists right towards Toji. But Toji could sense exactly what they were building up to, which told Toji that he had to focus on the offensive now. As he rushed right towards the fists coming at him, starting to dodge each and every single one of them, even though they were being fired at a much faster pace than before, firing off even faster than Junichi had ever pulled off in his life, he was still managing to avoid each and every single one of them. And Toji finally closed the distance, sword prepared to cut off Junichi's head right then and there. However, a moment before the sword could connect, suddenly he felt his entire body stop in movement, as Ranta was using his full power completely to stop Toji, yelling out to do it now. leaving Junichi releasing an incredibly powerful fist, one so massive in terms of size and energy that it was eclipsing the entire building. It was visible all across the battlefield as it hit Toji head-on. Even Junichi beginning to chant while making hand signs as well, trying to make sure that this blow was going to be as powerful as possible to try and kill Toji. As Ranta's body fell to the ground, doing that move completely killed Ranta. Even with him being in an amplified state, trying to hold down Toji like that was quite hard for him. As a pant came out of Junichi, he thought to himself that he did it. He finally killed Toji. He finally proved why Jujutsu Sorcery would be better than any type of body that could ever exist. Until suddenly out from the dust, the chain of 1,000 miles went right through his heart, pulling him towards Toji as Toji cut off their head. Blood was leaking down from Toji's arms. It did cause some small amount of damage to him, but nothing too major. Even despite Junichi's best effort, he couldn't put down or even hurt Toji that much. As Junichi could see now the real power gap that had always existed between Toji and himself. Even though he had taken Mahito's deal after death, even though he had become stronger, there was no way he was ever going to reach this level. As he died, the life fading from his eyes that were filled to the brim with hatred, before Toji began to head towards Nagumo, not even thinking about the three he just killed. Now he needed to focus. Now he needed to put down Mahito once and for all. Now up next, I do want to spend some time talking about the sponsor to the channel, Fan Dominion, an old friend of the channel that has a ton of cool anime merch, especially on the JJK side of things, but cool merch overall. And if you're looking for something that looks stylish, something that you can wear out in public and not be called a weeb for, but at the same time be recognized by your friends for wearing something really cool, they have good things in store for you. Or are you looking for something to complete your cosplay with? Well, Fan Dominion has you covered, and don't worry, they aren't expensive at all. And on top of that, if you use my code both in the description as well as on screen now, you can get a 10% discount. Yep, that's right, a 10% discount. However, now I'm going to spend some time showing off their beautiful catalog. And if you like any of this merch and any of this merch looks awesome to you, remember our code EF10 and you'll be able to get a 10% discount. Anyways, I'm going to see y'all later.